morning, everyone. My name is Frank Jaskolke with the Medical Alley Association, and I'm so pleased to have you join us today for the first AMA Ask Me Anything of the year as part of the Medical Alley Starts program. We've got a fun discussion for you today, and I want to give you just a couple of points as we get started. As we go through the discussion, AMA Ask Me Anything, this is your opportunity to ask questions that you might have of another entrepreneur that's out there in the ecosystem. So as we're going through, please feel free anytime, just throw a question into the Q&A function. I'll be monitoring that, and I'll pull your questions into the discussion as we go through. I've got a set of starter questions to kick us off, but anytime, type your questions in, and we'll see what we might come up with. This is a program put on by Medical Alley Starts, our initiative to support the startup ecosystem. In 2022, we had the pleasure of working with 900 different startup companies from around the world to help plug them into this Medical Alley ecosystem to find capital, customers, and talent so that you might advance patient care. To do that work, we're supported by a great group of partners who have helped to underwrite our work, make it possible to serve startups that, as many of you well know, often don't yet have the funding in place to be able to buy the key services they need, but they need those critical partners, critical advisors to get to that next milestone. And I'm pleased to be joined by two of our great partners today, with Ryan Johnson from Fredrickson and Byron and Paul Carlson from CLA. And I'm going to ask them to just say a couple of quick words and let you know what they're up to. Ryan, I might start with you. Could you give us a quick intro on your work?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Frank. So I'm Ryan Johnson, a corporate healthcare attorney at Fredrickson and Byron, where I co-chair our life sciences group. So Fredrickson is a Minneapolis-based firm with offices across the Midwest, Mexico, and China, with what's approaching 400 attorneys, a significant number of which represent healthcare and life science companies. So we really understand the industry, and our subject matter experts represent hundreds and hundreds of life science and healthcare companies. And we really enjoy working with startups. In fact, we have an entire multi-specialty group focused on startups, which we call SURGE, which is short for Startup and Rapid Growth Enterprises. So SURGE offers excellent services to startups with flexible and economical pricing. If you want to learn more about SURGE, please contact me or any of our SURGE attorneys listed on our website. Our lawyers really understand the needs of startups, whether it's hiring and integrating new people, ensuring that intellectual property is protected, working through financing to help fuel growth. We really understand startups. We're proud to have supported Medical Alley for many years. We're proud new sponsors of the STARTS program, and I'm very much looking forward to today's webinar. So thank you, Frank.
Ryan, thank you. I really appreciate it. And folks, you should know, Fredrickson as a law firm has been so incredibly supportive of this ecosystem for so long. They don't just talk it, they really do deliver. And Paul, if you would, maybe say a few words about your work in CLA.
Thank you, Frank. As Frank mentioned, my name is Paul Carlson, and I'm a manager with our life science practice at CLA. And CLA is a national accounting and professional services firm, and we provide industry-focused accounting, tax, and consulting services across the entire continuum of care. And I work specifically with life science and healthcare companies to help meet those entrepreneurs and help to mitigate financial risk and help ultimately those entrepreneurs and the business owners to help define, articulate, and ultimately achieve the future that you envision for your company. So this is our second year sponsoring the STARTS program, and the first year was a fantastic experience, and we got to have many discussions and assist many startup companies, and we look forward to the second year of our program, and we look forward to today's discussion and continuing this sponsorship. And so with that, we're offering a discounted services for the first year of our working relationship to help those companies conserve capital to invest in their products and services to ultimately help grow and scale the company. So very excited to be here and very excited to help this program in the second year. Thank you, Frank.
Paul, thank you. We appreciate it, and we appreciate the investment that CLA is making in the startup community. It really does say, I think, a lot about this community, that there are companies like Fredrickson and Byron, like CLA, that spend their time, spend their capital to make sure that you all as entrepreneurs have great services, but that also 10 years, 20 years, 30 years from now, that there will still be this vibrant entrepreneurial community. And so with that, I think we're going to kick off the discussion. I'm really excited for this one, actually, because it's kind of a unique take on the entrepreneurial community, joined by Matt Adams, who some of you may know from his work at Minnetronix, a successful contract product development and manufacturing company in the device community. You may not be as familiar with the work they're doing on their own startups and kind of the unique take that brings. So Matt, I just want to say thank you for spending a little bit of time with us today. Maybe you could start with give us just a little bit of your background and what Minnetronix has been up to relative to the startup ecosystem.
Frank, happy to do that. And first off, thank you. Big shout out to Medical Alley for all the hard work and bringing our ecosystem together and getting a program like this up and running. Relative to my background, basically my entire career has been in med tech, and for the most part really oriented around developing and then globally commercializing products in a bunch of different medical specialties. So one that's got a pretty clear greater purpose and has been pretty close to the heart for a number of years. From a Minnetronix perspective, as you mentioned, we have a very unique offering in that most of the world would know us as a contract product development and manufacturing partner. We very proudly work with a large number of startups in the ecosystem that you referenced. In the last few years, we've begun to expand that offering to include not only the traditional product development manufacturing services we're most known for, but also beginning to develop products on our own that the most recent example we now distribute through a partner. So if you're someone in the space who is coming to a Minnetronix, you can not only sign up for the more traditional contract services, you could come for a completely finished product that if you happen to have a sales force in the right call point, drop straight into your sales bag. And it's taken partnering from that perspective to a whole new level.
Interesting. And I might ask on that part, on the working with a partner on the commercial side of things, we did a lot of startups who asked about like building out distribution networks, going to the commercial side. What has that been like for you guys as far as, bringing a product to market and developing that partnership? Are there any pitfalls you might suggest watch out for to companies or aha moments that you had?
Yeah, absolutely. Good question, Frank. So kind of a two-part answer. I mean, one of the benefits of now being able to come to a Minnetronix is you've actually done all of that and can speak not only from the observer seat and watching a number of our clients and where they go, but from our own personal experience and what worked and what didn't. I would say sort of short list of typical pitfalls, how aggressively you approach the market as you're trying to get a brand new product through value analysis committees. You're trying to make sure that you've got all the reimbursement work you likely did is flowing the way you really thought it should. All the hard work to establish pricing for the product, is it being accepted the way you thought the market would? Those things will all tend to take substantially longer than the plan you might have started with. I think one of the things we'll often find is that people will hit that so aggressively. They'll invest in so much sales channel on such a large scale so early that often if you need a little extra time to work out that last kink in the product or adjust pricing a little bit, or you got to change your reimbursement approach just slightly, the amount of time that can take relative to a burn rate that obviously is top of mind for all startups can really be critical. I think one of the things we had recent success with in the product that we launched late last year and really at full scale just earlier this year through a partner, we were able to tailor that approach and scale things a bit more to really pay attention to that capital efficiency that can be so critical in launch phases.
Yeah, well said. I've heard a couple of companies describe like fail small. If you go all in at the beginning and you got something wrong, you could burn so much capital and waste so many cycles that you might not recover, starting a little bit smaller, working out the mistakes and the kinks that are inevitable before you kind of put the fuel on the fire, I can, yeah, save a company, save a lot of trouble.
Yeah, Frank, that's perfectly said. The fail small, fail early, and keep enough dry powder to give yourself maneuvering room is really a key learning.
Yeah. And folks, I'll remind you, if you have any questions, go ahead and throw them in the Q&A. I've got that pulled up. You mentioned dry powder, and before we had started, you mentioned you're out at the LSI conference. What's the sentiment like been the last couple of days? You know, we've seen just in the last few weeks with SV Bank and other issues, like maybe a little bit of disruption in the market. Um, what's your sense of how, you know, the startup and the investor community is feeling right now?
Well, I'll tell you, first off, LSI is packed. So there's definitely plenty of momentum and plenty of people that have not taken their foot off the gas. And while all the changes in the banking industry have certainly been a topic of discussion, it really hasn't. The energy level is very high. Maybe it's slowed down for those that are trying to get to a close on the next round. It's perhaps slowed some of that down a bit, which gets to keep as much dry powder as you can, because time can often be your enemy. But I think the ecosystem that Medical Alley, LSI, and so many of us have worked so hard to build over so many years, it's not going to stop. Perhaps we've got a slight slowdown as things readjust and the banking world kind of settles back into the new norm, but it's certainly not going to stop the forward progress in the startup world.
I appreciate hearing that, and I'm glad to hear that the conference is packed. That's a very good sign. Um, you know, you've been in, or you are in, both the startup world and, you know, a relatively large, growing, established firm. A topic we've had come up from startup executives lately that hadn't come up in the past, but in the last year has been coming up more and more, has been the management and the leadership side of things. And I'd be curious for your contrast on, what's different or what's not different when you have, say, like your Minnetronix general manager hat on versus the startup hat on in managing a team or leading a team. Is it much different? Is it just the scale, or is it kind of the same?
Well, that's a great question, Frank. In a lot of ways, it's really not different. I think that's part of the magic of a Minnetronix, is that the engagement, whether it's more in a startup mode where we're trying to finish, or somewhere in the midst of developing and commercializing a new product, or working with a more traditional Minnetronix service business type customer, many of which are startups, to be frank. The energy, the approach, it's all very interrelated. So it's not really taking one hat off and putting another on. I think, part of where the magic come in is that it's not us coming in from the observer's seat. It's us really being able to walk alongside a client, because we're doing the same thing on our own. And the learnings that go back and forth, and the level of service we provide in either, in either situation, frankly, are very much the same.
Very interesting. So we've got a question that's about the specific startup. And before I ask that, maybe could you give the audience a little bit of background on the new venture that you've been working on and that's now commercial?
Absolutely. So that venture is called Cerevention. You can find it on our website. It's focused specifically in neurocritical care. So we started with a little bit of IP years ago that was acquired, and then the rest was really developed from scratch within the walls of Minnetronix. We've got 3 products in that portfolio. The first one is called Mind's Eye. It's the industry's first deep brain surgical access system, minimally invasive and expandable. So it's a bit of a feat of engineering, as you might expect from a place like Minnetronix, and an industry first for those that are trying to either resect deep brain tumors or remove intracerebral hemorrhages, a form of a blood clot that represents a form of hemorrhagic stroke. So that product we developed from from scratch, early voice of customer, took all the way through FDA clearance, first human cases, and then we were able to stand up a partnership with Mizuho to support distribution of that product across the United States. So in their case, they found a technology that's very complementary to the rest of their portfolio, drops straight into their sales bag, and then we collaborate as we go out and train physicians, support new cases, get through value analysis committees, all of these steps one goes through to get a successful product launch going. And we started that last fall. We really hit it hard the beginning of this year, and so far it is going fantastic.
I'm glad to hear that. Knowing how much work went into getting to that point of market launch, I'm glad to hear it's going well. So we had a question from the audience, and they were wondering about, and you mentioned clearance, so I'm assuming a 510K type product, how you guys went about deciding what sort of regulatory pathway to pursue, setting aside, some of that is dictated by the nature of the product, the risk and the indication. But did you guys give any consideration to, should it be a straight up 510K? Is there a de novo, or even would there be a PMA pathway worthwhile pursuing? How did you think through that, was the question.
The short answer is we thought deeply and early on about exactly how that was going to work. And to be honest, a part of the original investment rationale, while we started with just a basic clinical unmet need that we could obviously define very well, is step one. But very rapidly after that is, what type of solutions are we willing to entertain as long as they meet that need? And we did have a preference, especially being the first product we were going to develop and launch. We did have a preference to stay closer to a 510K world than a PMA world, right? In part, that rolls in as a component of the investment thesis very early on. Now, once we got down that road, we were actually even more fortunate in this case, because this particular Mind's Eye in particular was third-party reviewable, which is a path not all that well utilized, I would say, at least based on our experience in our service business. It's a suggestion you can often make, or a path that can help lead certain customers down that a lot of folks aren't all that aware of. So in that case, the third-party review was incredibly valuable because we got clearance for that product in record time. So the big message, though, there being that very early on, we were thinking quite deeply around the regulatory strategy and which path we were going to take.
It makes a ton of sense, and I'm glad you mentioned the third-party review, because you're right. It's no longer truly a new thing, but it is still, it seems, relatively low adoption. Not a fit for every product, but where it is a fit, it can be quite advantageous. I'm curious on the commercial partnership side. We talked with a lot of companies where one of their struggles is they have a product, they have a market identified, and they're interested in partnering with a company that has that sales channel, but they're not sure the right way to position or to approach developing that relationship. Maybe could you talk a bit about how you guys went about finding the right partner and developing that partnership, knowing that, if you do that wrong, that is a significant risk to the company?
Yeah, you're exactly right. If approached incorrectly, that will definitely impact the value you achieve on your product. In our case, we had the bonus of time, because obviously, while Cerevention is very much startup and it's run like that, the burn rate doesn't necessarily go to zero where you're forced to do something that you maybe aren't as comfortable with. But the approach, whether you're in that spot or not, is kind of the same. And for us, honestly, it was getting in the market. So we're out in the field with physicians, and we're out there engaging with the other companies that have interest in this space. And a lot of it is just good old-fashioned building relationships and networking and figuring out who values what and which working relationships are really going to be the most productive. And we were fortunate to have pretty good interest and the opportunity to have a number of very good discussions before landing with Mizuho as the best partner for Mind's Eye. Time, just energy put into the actually doing the work in the field and building those relationships over, not weeks, but many months is what led us to a successful transaction.
Oh, very interesting. And I appreciate you pointing out the the sometimes seemingly simple thing of being in the field and just having the conversations. No amount of market research can replace, being there, talking with the docs, talking with the companies who are also out in the field and getting that like nuanced knowledge that you're not going to find on LinkedIn or in some report.
Yeah, I would say that's probably the biggest takeaway is that even with all of the technology available today, relationships in the little moments you create, whether you're in the OR during early cases or working with product development partners in the field, those relationships matter, because if the work you're doing is valued, they start to talk. They've all got their own networks, they've all got their own friends, and a lot of those relationships started that simply.
So I want to flip it around for a moment. Um, I know you guys on the product development and the manufacturing side, you worked with a lot of startups. Startups, as you well know, have significant risks in them, and that can sometimes be a challenge as like a customer, right? You want a customer that's going to be around, that's going to grow. I think it'd be helpful for some of the startup companies to understand when you or your team are looking at a company coming in that might want to engage your services, what are like red flags that maybe aren't as obvious that jump out and increase risk? And are there things that go the opposite where, maybe they're not the obvious things, right? They got 100 million in the bank, but that make you think, okay, there's higher potential or lower risk here because of this.
Yeah, that's a good question, and also a hard one, because we work, as you mentioned, with a large number of startups, and everybody comes in. There's a lot of different flavors. And I would say in general, we're very welcoming, and from a cultural perspective in Minnetronix, it's very much about trying to go to where you are in your journey in a startup world, and figuring out where we can add value and try to support or even accelerate your success to the maximum extent possible. Now, with that being said, obviously, there's a number of sort of obvious, which products do you think may have the better shot versus others, right? And certainly, those that are coming in with some relatively novel features, right? As you mentioned, funding is always important. It's hard to move forward if there's not, if nobody's got cash in the bank. I mean, there's some basics like that we'll certainly pay attention to, but our default is really trying to figure out, is whatever you're building something that we can add real value to and help get you to market faster than you could without us. And if we can sort that out, then it's pretty open arms in terms of trying to help the startup community continue to move forward.
We've got kind of a related question that came in from the audience where they're asking, in your experiences with Minnetronix and working with Cerevention, could you compare and contrast, say, the benefits and the challenges of having a startup company aligned with or tied to a larger organization? What's the kind of the plus and minuses on it as you've managed the development of this new venture?
Well, from a plus side, and this would be true whether you're a Cerevention or a startup coming in from the outside. I mean, the bonus of working with a Minnetronix in that capacity is that you can turn off the R&D or the manufacturing spend, or turn it back on as needed, and keep manage your burn rate and your capital allocation a bit more efficiently. That's true for us. I think that's one of the advantages of what we're bringing, so that if you're a Mizuho in this case, right, you've got access to a product that there was really no R&D risk in that for them in that capacity, and obviously they were able to get into a completed product, right? And for us, we could develop it in a very capital efficient manner. We obviously try to deliver that to our Minnetronix Inc. service customers as well, right? So pretty high level of capital efficiency compared to if you're trying to do all this kind of thing internally. And I would say that from a partnering perspective, again, the fact that we do both really changes the level of conversation you can have with a client, because our perspective isn't just sort of observing from the side. It's we've done it, and maybe we can actually provide you with, we tried this, it didn't work. Like we advise maybe you go another direction, or here's a piece of material that, in fact, we had a recent discussion on this topic exactly. Customer first product they've ever launched, getting stuck in value analysis committees. Well, hey, we're doing the same thing right now. Here's the package we've put together to facilitate as efficient movement through the value analysis committee as we possibly can, right? Now, even though our exact content isn't going to help you, the outline and how that's all framed can, and we're able to hand that off and share. You're not going to get that level of connection really anywhere else.
And specifically on the value analysis committees, we probably have some entrepreneurs, if they're newer to it, may not be as familiar with that. So could you talk about what that is from the perspective of a new device company coming to market? What does the VAC do, and what has been your guys' approach to navigating that process?
Yeah, well, as many know, historically, a physician would be able to come in, look at your product, say, I want it, and it's done, right? Your POs go back and forth, and you're on the shelf and doing cases. In today's world, that's less and less true, where the physician can really advocate to the value analysis committee, who's going to be made up of still a clinician, but more and more hospital administration. You've got accountants, you've got department heads who are all now trying to figure out whether or not, A, they can afford whatever you're doing. How does it impact reimbursement or costs and payments for the hospital itself? Is it better than some other alternative they may entertain? And that group is typically going to be more oriented around the numbers and reimbursement than they are the clinical need and the benefit that the product provides. So the content you provide for the value analysis committee needs to satisfy not only the physician need, but reimbursement, accounting, alternatives they may entertain, all in one package that, as the provider of the product, you may never get direct access to that value analysis committee. So that content's also got to be in a form that your sales rep can hand off to, say, a physician who can go in and feel confident advocating to get that product into the hospital system.
So we got a question from the audience on that, asking that kind of work. Did you guys develop that package internally? Did you get outside help, or was it a mix? And if it was outside help, what kind of help did you seek out?
So it was a mix. It was all developed internally, but just like any other step in our product development process, we're very externally oriented. So in those cases, honestly, we found a few clinician partners, and we found a few VAC members who would provide feedback, right? We leveraged those folks as advisors, and we're able to put together a pretty, at least based on results to date, a pretty successful package to help us get through value analysis committees in a expeditious manner. In that theme of staying pretty externally oriented, where you're working with not just the clinicians, which most startups will do, but expanding that to being able to get into hospital administration and other people that are in the decision-making process of getting your product from your distribution center and onto their shelves.
Very cool. Thank you. That, I think I can remember about, 10 years ago now, as VACs really, they'd always been around to some degree, but as they started to really gain prominence, we had an event where a doctor from Hennepin Healthcare presented on how they did it. And it's burned in my head because our event's normally attended by a wide range of people. This was standing room only, device company CEOs. because it's such a critical part of getting the product across the finish line. And I still, to this day, I talk to companies who assume, hey, clinically it's great, the doctors will push it through. And I say this as audience members, if you think that it's not the case, like what Matt just talked about, I cannot emphasize how important it is to understand. Um, Maybe last question I want to ask you, Matt. I want you to think about the future now. I am blown away just in the last couple of years how rapidly the device industry has advanced. Like all the challenges in the pandemic, how amazing the industry responded. When you think the next, say, 5 years coming out, what gets you most excited? Is there a technology on the horizon, or is there something you see out there where you go, this is going to keep me going for the next couple of years on this?
Yeah, that kind of goes back for me. So that's a pretty personal question, actually, because that kind of goes back to why I decided to join the med tech industry to begin with. And I think this was true 20 years ago, it's still true today. And that even though the technologies will continue to advance, that's always exciting. How you get products adopted will continue to change as healthcare economics and those kinds of things continue to evolve. That's always exciting. And you know what, those moments when something that you or your business or your team produced are being used, like in our case, you're in an OR, you're treating brain cancer patients or someone who's just had a stroke. So, I mean, these are obviously very debilitating conditions, and the fact that they're in there and they have a chance at an improved life, quality of life because of something you built. That's as rewarding now as it was 20 years ago and as it will be 20 years from now. And I think that sentiment is what certainly drives me in this space. And I think a number of us that are all in med tech have a similar sort of higher calling, that your work will definitely have left a positive mark on the world. And that's going to be true as healthcare continues to evolve 10, 20, 30 years from now.
That is so right on. And I gotta say, it's the thing that keeps me motivated, being able to see, the work you've done, Matt, and the work that audience members, that all of you have done to make an impact on so many people's lives, like truly amazing. And I appreciate that all of you are a part of this community. For the audience member just asked the last question, I will follow up with you right after this event. We have a couple of others that have come in that are really hyper specific and probably are going to be individual responses. So I'll get back to you. But Matt, I want to say thank you so much for spending a little bit of your time today, sharing some of the journey that you've been on and that Minnetronix has been on. And I hope you have a good rest of the conference, which, was it finish up tomorrow? Or is it finish today?
No, we're still going strong all through tomorrow.
Perfect. Good. Well, have a great conference. Audience members, thank you for participating, and I hope you have a great day.
Thank you, Frank. Thank you all.
See you, folks.